The dusty streets of Perdition Creek carried no law except the law of money, and on this scorching afternoon in 1878, money was about to buy something that should never have been for sale. In the back room of the Crimson Rose Saloon, a crowd of men had gathered for an auction that would have been illegal in any civilized territory. But Perdition Creek was far from civilization, and Sheriff Kane's pocket was deep enough to accommodate any moral flexibility required. Lily Matthews stood on a makeshift platform, her 20-year-old frame trembling beneath a simple white dress that her stepfather had insisted she wear to show the merchandise properly. Her hands shook uncontrollably at her sides, and her blue eyes stared at nothing, as if her mind had already retreated somewhere safe while her body endured what was about to happen. "Gentlemen," called out Marcus Webb, the saloon owner and unofficial auctioneer, "here we have a rare prize, a genuine innocent, untouched and ready for proper education in the arts of pleasing men. What am I bid for this lovely flower?" Lily's stepfather, Harold Matthews, stood beside the platform counting anticipated profits while avoiding his stepdaughter's gaze. He had inherited responsibility for her when he married her dying mother 2 years ago, but had always seen her as a burden rather than a blessing. When gambling debts and failed business ventures left him desperate, selling Lily had seemed like his only option for financial salvation. The bidding started aggressively, with ranch foremen, traveling merchants, and local businessmen calling out amounts that made Harold's eyes gleam with greed. $50, $75, $100. The numbers climbed while Lily's soul seemed to sink deeper into protective numbness. In the back corner of the room, barely visible in shadows cast by oil lamps, stood a man who didn't belong among the eager bidders. Ethan Cole was 42 years old, whether by years of ranch work and grief, with callous hands and eyes that had seen too much loss. He had come to town only to sell his last 3 cattle, animals he could no longer afford to feed during the drought that had devastated his small ranch. Ethan had intended to conduct his business and return immediately to his isolated homestead, but the sound of the auction had drawn his curiosity, then his horror as he realized what was being sold. The sight of the terrified young woman on the platform hit him like a physical blow, reminding him of his own daughter who had died of fever 3 years ago, and his wife who had followed her into death 6 months later. $150, called out a fat merchant from Denver, his eyes hungry as he studied Lily's trembling form. $175, counted a cattle baron known for his cruelty to both animals and the women who worked his private establishment. Ethan felt something break open in his chest. A combination of rage, protective instinct, and desperate recognition of someone whose life was about to be destroyed by forces beyond her control. He looked down at the single dollar bill in his pocket, all the money he had left after selling his cattle for barely enough to cover his feed debt. $1, against men bidding hundreds. It was absurd, hopeless, meaningless. But as the bidding reached $200 and Lily's face grew even paler, Ethan stepped forward from the shadows and raised his hand. $1, he said quietly. The room erupted in laughter. Even Webb seemed amused by the ridiculous bid. "Sir, I think you misunderstood the nature of this auction," Webb called out with condescending humor. "We're currently at $200, not $1. "I heard correctly," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "I bid $1, and I have something else to offer." The laughter died as men sensed something different in Ethan's tone. Harold Matthews stepped closer, greed overcoming amusement. "What else?" Harold demanded. Ethan reached into his vest and pulled out a folded document, the deed to his ranch. It was nearly worthless given the drought and debt, but it was still legal ownership of 300 acres. "This land has water rights," Ethan said, knowing it was technically true even though the well was nearly dry. 300 acres with grazing rights and mineral claims, worth more than anything being bid here. Harold's eyes fixed on the deed with the intensity of a starving man seeing food. He snatched the document and examined it quickly, his breathing growing excited as he read the legal description. This is substantial property," Harold muttered, then looked up at the other bidders. "The bid stands at $1 plus property deed valued at considerable worth." "You can't be serious," protested the cattle baron. "That land is probably worthless." "Property is property," Webb said slowly, understanding that Harold had the legal right to accept any offer he chose. If Mr. Matthews accepts a bid. Harold looked at Lily, then at the deed, then at the room full of angry men who could make his life difficult if they felt cheated. But the deed represented something tangible, real property that could be sold or developed, something more reliable than cash that could be lost at a gambling table. Sold, Harold said quickly, before anyone could raise further objections. $1 and the property deed. The girl goes to Ethan Cole. Ethan said firmly, stepping forward to hand over his dollar and deed while the room buzzed with confused anger. As the transaction was completed with bewildering speed, Lily finally looked directly at her purchaser. Her eyes met Ethan's, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She saw not hunger or cruelty, but something she couldn't quite identify. Perhaps sadness, perhaps determination, perhaps simple human decency in a room devoid of it. Miss, Ethan said gently, my name is Ethan Cole. I'd like to take you away from here, if you're willing. Lily nodded once, still unable to speak, but something in her expression suggested that for the first time in hours, she felt a tiny spark of hope. As they walked out of the Crimson Rose Saloon together, past angry bidders and into the harsh sunlight of Perdition Creek's Main Street, neither Ethan nor Lily knew that this desperate, impossible transaction would become the foundation for something neither had thought possible. A second chance at life, love, and healing for two souls that had been broken by loss and circumstance. The wagon ride from Perdition Creek to Ethan's ranch took 3 hours through country that seemed determined to demonstrate nature's capacity for both beauty and harshness. Lily sat beside Ethan on the wooden seat, still wearing the white dress that had marked her as merchandise, still trembling though whether from shock, fear, or relief, neither of them could say. For the first hour, they traveled in complete silence. Ethan focused on navigating the rough trail, while stealing occasional glances at his unexpected passenger. Try to understand what he had committed himself to. Lily stared straight ahead, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white, as if she were afraid that speaking or moving might shatter whatever fragile protection she had found. Miss, Ethan said finally, his voice gentle in the vast quiet of the prairie, I want you to know that what happened back there, the auction, the bidding, none of that was right. What your stepfather did was wrong, and what those men intended was wrong. Lily turned to look at him for the first time since they had left town. Her blue eyes were still wide with shock, but something in them suggested she was beginning to process what had happened to her. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you buy me? Ethan was quiet for several long moments, trying to find words for impulses he didn't fully understand himself. I couldn't let it happen, he said finally. Couldn't watch someone destroy your life for money when I had the power to prevent it. But you gave up your ranch, Lily said, and Ethan heard something like guilt in her voice. You gave up everything you own for a stranger. I gave up property for a person, Ethan corrected gently. That seems like a fair trade to me. Lily was quiet again, absorbing this response. What happens now? She asked. What do you expect from me? The question hung between them, loaded with implications that made Ethan's chest tighten. He understood that from Lily's perspective, she had simply been sold from one man to another, and had no reason to believe his intentions were different from those of the men who had been bidding against him. Nothing, Ethan said firmly. I expect nothing from you except that you allow me to provide you with safety and shelter until you can decide what you want to do with your life. You don't want. Lily began, then stopped, unable to voice the question. I want you to be safe, Ethan said, understanding what she was asking. I want you to have choices about your future. I want you to be able to sleep at night without fear. That's all I want. The simplicity and sincerity of his answer seemed to overwhelm Lily. Tears began flowing down her cheeks, the first emotion she had shown since the auction ended. I don't understand, she whispered. People don't do things like this. Give up everything for strangers. Some do, Ethan replied quietly, when the alternative is watching evil triumph over innocence. As they crested a low hill, Ethan's ranch came into view, a modest wooden house with a sagging front porch, a weather barn, and empty corrals that spoke of better times. The drought had turned the surrounding pastures brown, and the whole property had the sad, abandoned look of a place where hope had slowly died. "It's not much," Ethan said apologetically as they approached the house. "I haven't had much reason to maintain it properly since my wife died." "You were married?" Lily asked, the first question she had initiated. "For 15 years, Ethan replied, his voice carrying the weight of loss. "Anna died 3 years ago, 6 months after our daughter Emma. Fever took them both." Lily studied his profile as he spoke, seeing the grief etched in the lines around his eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That must have been terrible." "It was," Ethan acknowledged. "Still is. Some days. But I've learned that loss doesn't give us the right to stop caring about other people's suffering." When they reached the house, Ethan helped Lily down from the wagon with careful courtesy, as if she were a respected guest rather than someone he had purchased for $1. The gesture, small as it was, represented kindness that Lily hadn't experienced in years. Inside, the house showed clear signs of a man living alone without much attention to domestic comfort. The main room was clean but sparse, containing only essential furniture and lacking any of the warm touches that a woman's presence might have provided. "You can have the bedroom," Ethan said, indicating a door that led to what had obviously been the master bedroom. "I'll sleep out here on the sofa." "I can't take your bedroom," Lily protested. "This is your home." "It's your home now, too, for as long as you want it to be," Ethan replied firmly. "And a guest deserves the best accommodation the house can offer." That evening, as they shared a simple meal of beans and cornbread at Ethan's rough wooden table, both of them struggled with the enormous awkwardness of their situation. They were strangers bound together by an extraordinary transaction, trying to navigate the beginning of a relationship that had no normal precedent. "Can I ask about your family?" Ethan said gently. "How you came to be in your stepfather's custody?" Lily's hands tightened around her cup of coffee, but she answered with quiet dignity. "My mother died last year. Cancer. She married Harold when I was 17, thinking he would take care of both of us. But after she died, he saw me as something he could use to solve his financial problems." "What about your real father?" "Died when I was 14. Indian attack on our wagon train coming west." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but Ethan could hear the accumulated pain of multiple losses. "My mother and I barely survived. We thought Harold was our salvation when he offered to marry her and give us security." Ethan felt his anger toward Harold Matthews deepen, but kept his voice gentle. "You've had more than your share of loss and betrayal. I'm sorry for that. What about you?" Lily asked, surprising him with her directness. "What was your wife like?" Ethan smiled the first time since Lily had met him, and the expression transformed his whole face. She was light, always finding reasons to laugh or sing, always seeing possibilities where I saw problems. Our daughter Emma was just like her, full of joy and curiosity about everything." "Do you miss them?" "Every day," Ethan admitted. "But talking about them, sharing memories of them, that helps somehow, makes their lives feel like they still matter." That night, as Lily lay in a comfortable bed that had once belonged to Ethan's wife, she found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The events of the day seemed surreal. The auction, the rescue, the kindness of a stranger who had sacrificed everything to save her from a fate worse than death. In the main room, Ethan also lay awake, wondering what he had committed himself to and whether he had the emotional strength to help someone else heal when his own wounds were still so raw. But when he thought about Lily's terrified face on that auction platform, he knew he would make the same choice again. Neither of them understood yet that their mutual brokenness would become the foundation for something neither had expected to find again: hope, healing, and eventually a love built on respect and shared commitment to protecting what was precious in each other. The first week of their unusual arrangement passed quietly, with Ethan and Lily carefully navigating the delicate process of learning to share space without overstepping boundaries that neither was quite sure how to define. Ethan threw himself into the few ranch chores that remained possible without livestock, while Lily spent her days exploring the house and tried to understand what her new life might look like. On the 8th morning, Ethan found Lily standing in what had obviously been Anna's garden, now overgrown with weeds and volunteer plants that had survived 2 seasons of neglect. She was holding a few wildflowers she found among the chaos, and her expression showed the first genuine interest he had seen from her since the auction. "Anna loved this garden," Ethan said, joining her among the Remen plants. "She could make anything grow, even in drought years like this one." "It must have been beautiful," Lily said softly. "I can see the pattern she was trying to create, the way she arranged different plants for height and color. You know about gardening?" "My mother taught me before she got sick. She said working with growing things was good for the soul." Lily paused, then looked at Ethan with tentative hope. "Would you mind if I tried to restore it? I know I have no right to change anything that belonged to your wife, but I need something to do with my hands, something that feels productive." The request surprised and moved Ethan. He had avoided the garden for 3 years, unable to bear the memories it contained. But the idea of Lily bringing it back to life felt like a gift rather than an intrusion. "Anna would have loved that," he said simply. "She always said gardens needed tending by someone who understood that plants could sense when they were truly cared for." Working together to clear the garden became their first truly cooperative effort. Ethan provided the heavy labor, pulling out larger weeds, moving rocks, preparing soil, while Lily worked with careful attention to detail, identifying plants worth saving and envisioning how the space might be restored. As they worked, they began to talk more naturally. Lily asked questions about the plants, about ranch life, about Ethan's life before tragedy changed everything. Ethan found himself curious about her childhood before her parents' deaths, her education, her dreams for a future that had been interrupted by circumstances beyond her control. "I always wanted to be a teacher," Lily admitted one afternoon as they planted seeds they had purchased during their weekly trip to town. "I love books, love learning new things. But after my father died, survival became more important than education. There's a school about 10 miles south of here that's been without a teacher for 8 months, Ethan mentioned. "The county can't pay much, but if you're interested..." Lily's face lit up with the first genuine excitement Ethan had seen from her. "Do you think they would consider someone like me? With my history..." "Your history is that you're an educated young woman who survived terrible circumstances with her dignity intact," Ethan said firmly. "Anyone who can't see past the rest isn't worth your time." The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Lily began to see possibilities for a future beyond simple survival and gratitude, while Ethan began to understand that rescuing her had given him something precious in return, a sense of purpose that went beyond grief and regret. Their growing comfort with each other was tested, however, when visitors began arriving at the ranch. News of Ethan's sudden acquisition of a young woman had spread quickly through the sparse community, and neighbors who had barely acknowledged his existence during his years of isolation suddenly found reasons to stop by and satisfy their curiosity. Mrs. Sarah Hendricks, the banker's wife and unofficial arbiter of local social standards, arrived on a Thursday afternoon with a basket of preserves and a mind full of questions. "Mr. Cole," she said with a kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, "we were all so surprised to hear about your guest. Such an unusual situation. Miss Matthews is staying here temporarily while she makes plans for her future." Ethan replied carefully, aware that Lily was listening from the kitchen where she was preparing lunch. "And how exactly did you meet this young lady? We don't recall seeing her at any local gatherings or church services." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "Lily is from back east originally. She came to this territory, seeking a fresh start after losing her parents." "How tragic," Mrs. Hendricks said, though her tone suggested she found it more suspicious than sad. "And what were her family's circumstances? We like to know about the backgrounds of new community members." Before Ethan could answer, Lily appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple blue dress that Ethan had purchased for her in town, and carrying a tray of coffee and cake. Her bearing was dignified despite the obvious challenge in Mrs. Hendricks's questions. "Mrs. Hendricks," Lily said with perfect courtesy, "I'm Lily Matthews. I understand you're curious about my background." The directness of her approach seemed to catch Mrs. Hendricks off guard. "Well, yes, we always like to welcome new members of our community." "I'm an orphan," Lily said simply. "Both my parents died when I was quite young. I've been supporting myself through various means since then, most recently as companion to an elderly lady who passed away last month. When I found myself alone again, Mr. Cole generously offered me shelter while I decide where to settle permanently." The explanation was truthful without being complete, and delivered with such calm dignity that Mrs. Hendricks found herself at a disadvantage. She had clearly come expecting to uncover scandal or impropriety, but was instead faced with a composed young woman who refused to be intimidated. After Mrs. Hendricks left, Ethan found Lily sitting on the front porch, staring out at the drought-brown pastures with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You handle that well," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "I've had practice dealing with people who judge first and ask questions later," Lily replied. "But I worry about what my presence here might cost you. Your reputation, your standing in the community. My standing in the community doesn't matter if it's based on assumptions and prejudice," Ethan said firmly. "What matters is that we're both trying to build decent lives from difficult circumstances." Lily turned to look at him, and Ethan saw something new in her expression. Not just gratitude or relief, but genuine respect and perhaps the beginning of deeper feeling. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for defending me, for seeing me as more than just what happened to me. Thank you for choosing to build a life here," Ethan replied, "for making this place feel less empty." That evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from their porch, both Ethan and Lily understood that they had moved beyond the desperate circumstances that had brought them together. They were beginning to choose each other, day by day, decision by decision, creating something that neither had expected, but both were beginning to value more than they had imagined possible. Their relationship was becoming something more complex and meaningful than rescue and gratitude. It was becoming partnership, friendship, and the foundation for healing that neither had thought possible. As autumn approached, the relationship between Ethan and Lily had evolved into something that surprised them both. What had begun as a desperate rescue had grown into a comfortable partnership built on mutual respect, shared work, and the gradual recognition that they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Lily had been hired as a teacher for the small school 10 miles south of the ranch, riding there 3 days a week on the gentle mare that Ethan had purchased for her with money earned from odd jobs around the county. Her natural intelligence and genuine care for her students was already earning respect from parents who had initially been skeptical about the mysterious young woman living at the coal ranch. "The children love her," reported Mrs. Mary Patterson, whose 3 sons were among Lily's pupils, during one of her visits to purchase eggs from the chickens Lily had convinced Ethan to acquire. "She has such patience with the slower learners, and she makes even arithmetic seem interesting somehow." Ethan felt a warm surge of pride at the compliment, then wondered when Lily's successes had become so important to his own sense of happiness. Somewhere in the gradual process of learning to live together, her well-being had become central to his own contentment in ways he hadn't expected. The change in their relationship was most apparent in small, daily intimacies that had developed organically. Lily would touch Ethan's shoulder when she passed behind his chair at breakfast. Ethan would brush a strand of hair from her face when she was concentrating on preparing lessons. They sat closer together on the porch in the evenings, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes talking about their hopes for the ranch and their future. The physical awareness between them was growing as well, though neither had acknowledged it directly. Ethan found himself noticing the way sunlight caught in Lily's golden hair when she worked in the garden, the gentle curve of her mouth when she smiled, the graceful way she moved through their shared space. Lily caught herself watching Ethan's strong hands as he worked, the way his face relaxed when he laughed, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. The shift from gratitude and companionship to something deeper became undeniable on a crisp October evening when an early storm struck the ranch with unexpected fury. Wind howled around the house, rattling windows and driving rain against the walls with such force that both Ethan and Lily wondered if the structure would hold, when a particularly violent gust shook the entire building. Lily instinctively moved closer to Ethan on the sofa, what had been reading by lamplight. Without thinking, he put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth with a sense of safety and rightness that surprised them both. "Are you afraid of storms?" Ethan asked gently, acutely aware of her closeness and the way she fit perfectly against his side. "Not usually," Lily admitted. "But something about being here with you, it makes me want to protect what we have. I don't want anything to damage this place, this life we're building." The simple honesty of her statement hung between them, carrying implications that neither had fully acknowledged before. She wasn't just talking about the physical structure of the house. She was talking about the emotional sanctuary they had created together. "Lily," Ethan said softly, his voice carrying a seriousness that made her look up at him. "I need to tell you something that I've been trying to understand myself." "What is it?" "When I bought your freedom in that saloon, I thought I was just preventing a terrible injustice. I thought I was helping a stranger, and then we'd figure out how to go our separate ways." Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. "But somewhere in these past months, you become precious to me, not just as someone I help, but as someone I care about deeply." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "I was afraid to hope that you might feel that way," she whispered, "because what I feel for you is so much more than gratitude. You've shown me what it means to be valued for who I am rather than what someone can take from me." "What do you feel?" Ethan asked gently. "I feel safe with you, but also alive in ways I never was before," Lily said, her voice growing stronger. I feel love, Ethan. Real love, not based on fear or obligation, but on genuine caring and respect." The word hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Ethan felt his heart racing as he looked into Lily's eyes and saw reflected to the same depth of feeling that had been growing in his own chest. "I love you, too," he said simply. "I didn't expect it, wasn't looking for it. But there it is. You brought joy back into my life when I thought I'd lost capacity for happiness forever." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, full of wonder at the connection they had discovered. When they separated, both of them were smiling through tears of relief and amazement. "What happens now?" Lily asked softly. "Now we stop pretending this is temporary," Ethan replied, taking her hands in his. "Now we start building something permanent together, if that's what you want." "It's what I want more than anything," Lily said firmly. "But I need you to know that I want to marry you not because I owe you my life, but because I choose you, because I want to spend my future with you." "Are you proposing to me, Miss Matthews?" Ethan asked with the first real laughter Lily had heard from him. "I suppose I am, Mr. Cole." "Well, you have me." "Try and stop me," Ethan replied, pulling her into his arms again. That night, as the storm raged outside their secure home, Ethan and Lily made plans for a wedding that would mark not just their legal union, but the transformation of a desperate rescue into a love story that had surprised them both. They had discovered that sometimes the most practical decision a person could make was to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, and hope over despair. Their relationship had grown from a dollar transaction into something precious and lasting. Proof that love could indeed bloom in the most unlikely circumstances when two people were brave enough to see the hidden value in each other's souls. Winter brought challenges that tested Ethan and Lily's newfound love in practical ways they hadn't anticipated. With Lily's teaching position reduced to just 1 day a week due to weather, they spent long days together in the confines of their small house, learning to navigate the intimate daily rhythms of a committed partnership. They were married in a simple ceremony performed by the traveling circuit preacher in November, with only a handful of neighbors as witnesses. Lily wore a dress she had sewn herself from blue calico, and Ethan borrowed a proper suit from the town banker. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with both of them speaking vows they had written themselves about choosing each other freely and building a life based on mutual respect and shared dreams. "Do you think Anna would approve?" Lily asked one evening as they sat before the fire, she mending one of Ethan's shirts while he worked on plans for expanding their small chicken coop. Ethan looked up from his drawings, considering the question seriously. "I think Anna would be glad that this house has laughter in it again," he said. "She always said that love wasn't a limited resource, that the more you shared, the more you had." "I'd like to believe that," Lily said softly. "Sometimes I worry that I'm taking something that belonged to her." "You're not taking anything," Ethan said firmly, setting aside his work to move closer to her on the sofa. "You're adding something new, something that honors what came before, while creating something entirely your own." The conversation reflected a challenge they both faced, learning to build a new life together while respecting the memory of Ethan's first family. Lily was careful never to change things that had obvious sentimental value, while Ethan made sure she knew she was free to make the house truly theirs rather than just his. The solution came gradually, through small acts of integration and creativity. Lily planted new sections in Anna's garden, while carefully preserving the original plants. Ethan built new furniture to accommodate two people, while keeping pieces that held special memories. Together, they created a home that honored the past while embracing their future. "I want children," Lily said one cold January night as they lay together in the warmth of their marriage bed. "I want to fill this house with the sounds of family again." "So do I," Ethan replied, stroking her hair in the lamplight. "But I also want to make sure you're ready for that responsibility. You're still so young, still discovering who you want to be." "I'm ready," Lily said with quiet certainty. "I know what I want now. A family built on love instead of obligation. Children who grow up knowing their value for who they are rather than what they can provide." Their first pregnancy was announced by Dr. Wilson during his spring rounds, and the news filled them both with joy that seemed to overflow into every aspect of their lives. Ethan threw himself into preparations for their child with focused energy, expanding the house, improving their financial security through careful planning and hard work, and creating an environment where a family could thrive. Lily continued teaching until her condition made travel difficult, then transitioned to tutoring individual students at home while preparing for motherhood with the careful attention she brought to everything important in her life. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," Ethan told her one evening as they worked together to paint the small room that would serve as a nursery. "Patient and wise and completely devoted to helping our children become the best versions of themselves." "And you're going to be a wonderful father again," Lily replied. "I see how you interact with my students when they visit, how naturally you encourage and protect them. Our children will be blessed to have you as their guide." The baby arrived on a warm September morning, with Dr. Wilson and two neighbor women attending the birth, while Ethan paced anxiously in the kitchen. When he finally heard the strong, healthy cry of his daughter, he felt a joy so intense it was almost overwhelming. "She's perfect," Lily whispered when Ethan was allowed into the bedroom to meet his daughter. "Look at her, Ethan. We made this beautiful little person together." Baby Anna, named for Ethan's first wife with Lily's wholehearted approval, was small but strong, with Lily's delicate features and Ethan's dark hair. Holding her, Ethan felt the familiar wonder of new fatherhood, but also something different from his experience with Emma, a sense that this child represented not just continuation of his family line, but transformation and renewal. She's going to grow up knowing she was wanted and planned for and celebrated, Lily said as she watched Ethan cradle their daughter with practiced gentleness. She's going to grow up in a home where love is abundant and freely given. The first months of parenthood brought exhaustion and adjustment, but also a depth of shared purpose that strengthened their bond even further. Watching Lily with their daughter filled Ethan with admiration for her natural maternal instincts and fierce protective love. Seeing Ethan's patience and tenderness with baby Anna convinced Lily that she had chosen the right partner for building the family she had always dreamed of having. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't been in that saloon that day?" Lily asked one evening as she nursed Anna, while Ethan cleaned up after dinner. "I try not to think about alternate possibilities," Ethan replied. "I'm too grateful for what we actually have." "I think about it sometimes," Lily admitted, "but not with regret, with amazement, that something so beautiful could grow from something so terrible, that one decision made in desperation could lead to so much happiness." As they sat together in their comfortable home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Lily's books and lesson plans, Ethan's ranch management papers, baby Anna sleeping peacefully in her cradle, both of them understood that they had achieved something remarkable. They had transformed a desperate rescue into a love story, an impossible bid into the foundation for a thriving family, and two broken lives into something whole and beautiful and worthy of the sacrifices that had made it possible. 2 years into their marriage, Ethan and Lily faced their first serious test as a couple when drought returned to the region with devastating force. The wells that had sustained them through previous dry spells began to fail. Their small herd of cattle grew thin, and the garden that had become Lily's pride and joy withered despite her best efforts to save it. "How bad is it?" Lily asked one evening as they reviewed their dwindling finances and calculated how long their savings would last. "Bad enough that we'll need to make difficult choices," Ethan admitted, holding baby Anna while Lily prepared their simple dinner. We can keep the house and core property, but we might have to sell the cattle and find other sources of income. What about my teaching? I could go back to full-time work now that Anna's older. Ethan looked at his wife, recognizing the determined expression that meant she was prepared to sacrifice her own preferences for their family's survival. The school district can barely afford to pay one teacher, let alone hire additional help, but there might be other options. The solution came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson, whose sons had flourished under Lily's teaching, arrived at their ranch with a proposition that would change their financial situation dramatically. Several families have been talking, Mrs. Patterson explained as she sat in their kitchen, bouncing Anna on her knee. We want to hire you privately to teach our children year-round, not just during the official school term. We can pay better than the county, and you could work from your own home. The offer was generous enough to replace Ethan's lost cattle income, but also represented something more significant: recognition from their community that Lily's skills were valuable and sought after. Word has spread about your teaching methods, Mrs. Patterson continued. Parents from 3 counties over are asking if you consider taking their children as boarding students. You could build a real educational enterprise here. As autumn progressed, their ranch transformed into something unprecedented in the region, a combination working farm and private school where children from distant families came to live and learn under Lily's guidance. Ethan built additional sleeping quarters and classroom space, while Lily developed curriculum that combined traditional academic subjects with practical skills like agriculture, animal husbandry, and domestic arts. You've created something remarkable here, said Dr. Wilson during one of his visits to check on the health of their student boarders. These children are getting education that rivals what they receive in eastern cities, but they're also learning skills that will serve them well on frontier. The success of their educational venture brought unexpected attention. Territorial officials visited to observe their methods, and newspapers wrote articles about the innovative Frontier Academy that was producing unusually well-educated and capable young people. But the most significant change was in Ethan and Lily themselves. The challenge of building something entirely new together had deepened their partnership and revealed strengths neither had known they possessed. I love watching you teach, Ethan told Lily one evening as they sat on their expanded porch, watching their students, now 8 children ranging in age from 6 to 16, complete their evening chores. You have such a gift for making each child feel valued while challenging them to grow. I love watching you mentor the older boys, Lily replied. You're teaching them not just ranch skills, but how to be good men, how to work hard, treat others with respect, and take responsibility for their actions. Their second child, a son they named James, was born into this thriving community of learning and growth. Unlike Anna, who was growing up as the center of her parents' attention, James was surrounded from birth by the sounds and activities of a bustling household where education, work, and family life were seamlessly integrated. He's going to grow up thinking this is normal, Lily observed as she watched 3-year-old Anna help their teenage students with their reading while baby James slept peacefully in his cradle nearby. Growing up in a community where learning and teaching are just part of daily life. Maybe that's the most important thing we've accomplished, Ethan said. Creating a place where children learn that education and useful work go hand in hand, where they see adults treating each other with respect and working together toward common goals. By the end of their 3rd year of marriage, the Cole Ranch Academy had become a regional institution. Families from across the territory sought placement for their children, and several of their first students had gone on to attend universities in the East before returning to apply their education to frontier challenges. Do you ever regret it? Lily asked as they reviewed applications from families wanting to send their children to the academy. Giving up the quiet life we had at first for all this responsibility? Ethan looked around their property, now bustling with activity as students tended gardens, cared for livestock, and pursued their studies with enthusiasm that filled the air with energy and purpose. I regret nothing, he said firmly. Every choice we've made, from that first desperate decision in the saloon to this latest expansion of our mission, has made our lives richer and more meaningful. As they stood together watching the sunset over land that had been transformed by love, hard work, and shared commitment to education, Ethan and Lily understood that their rescue romance had become something even more significant, a demonstration that 2 people with courage and vision could create institutions that would influence generations of children and families. The autumn of 1883 marked 5 years since that desperate day when Ethan had bid $1 for Lily's freedom in Perdition Creek's infamous auction. As they stood together on the porch of their expanded ranch house, now bustling with the activity of 15 boarding students and their own 3 children, both Ethan and Lily marveled at how completely their lives had been transformed. The Cole Rand Academy had grown into the most respected educational institution in the territory, attracting students from families who travel hundreds of miles to enroll their children in what had become known as the school that builds character along with knowledge. State educational officials had offered to purchase their curriculum and methods for implementation throughout the territorial school system. Mr. and Mrs. Cole, said Professor Williams from the Territorial University, who had come to evaluate their academy for potential partnership agreements, what you created here represents a new model for frontier education. Your graduates consistently outperform students from traditional schools in both academic knowledge and practical skills. Ethan and Lily exchanged the kind of look that couples develop after years of true partnership, a communication that required no words but conveyed shared pride in what they had built together. We learned early that education works best when it serves the whole person, Lily explained, watching their students work in the garden while discussing mathematical principles of crop rotation. Academic knowledge without practical application becomes abstract and useless. Practical skills without intellectual foundation become limiting and narrow. And we learn that children thrive when they're treated as valuable members of a working community, rather than just recipients of adult instruction, Ethan added. When they contribute meaningful labor and see the direct results of learning, education becomes personally relevant rather than externally imposed. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar but unexpected visitor, Sheriff Tom Bradley, now graying but still vigorous, riding up to their house with an expression that seemed more curious than official. Ethan, Lily, Bradley called as he dismounted. I bring news from Perdition Creek that I thought you'd want to hear. The mention of that lawless town where their story had begun immediately captured their attention. Perdition Creek had remained a source of occasional worry, a reminder of the evil that had nearly destroyed Lily's life before Ethan's intervention. What kind of news? Ethan asked, stepping down from the porch. The town's gone legitimate, Bradley said with obvious satisfaction. New territorial laws shut down the brothel operations completely. The Crimson Rose is now a proper hotel, and the whole place is turning into a regular settlement with families and legitimate businesses. Lily felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief that other women would be spared a fate she had barely escaped, sadness for all those who hadn't been as fortunate as she had been, and gratitude for the chain of events that had led to her rescue and redemption. What happened to men who ran those operations? She asked. Most of them moved on to territories where such business is still tolerated. A few faced criminal charges under the new anti-trafficking laws. Bradley's expression grew more serious. Including Harold Matthews, your stepfather. He was arrested trying to sell another young woman, a neighbor's daughter whose parents had died. The family pressed charges, and he's serving 10 years in territorial prison. The news hit Lily like a physical blow. Despite everything Harold had done to her, learning that he continued victimizing other young women filled her with a mixture of anger and guilt that she hadn't somehow prevented his ongoing crimes. There was nothing you could have done to stop him, Ethan said gently, reading her expression. You couldn't have known he would continue, and you couldn't have stopped him even if you had known. But other families suffer because I didn't speak out about what he did to me, Lily said, tears beginning to flow. Other families were saved because you built this academy, Sheriff Bradley said firmly, because you created a place where children learn that they have value and choices, because you prove that people can overcome terrible circumstances and build something beautiful from the ruins. That evening, after the sheriff had departed and their students had settled into their evening study periods, Ethan and Lily walked together through the gardens and facilities they had created, processing the news and reflecting on the long journey that had brought them to this moment. Do you think we've done enough? Lily asked as they paused beside the memorial garden she had planted in honor of Anna and Emma, Ethan's first family. You think the good we've created balances out the evil that could have been prevented? I think we've done what was ours to do, Ethan replied, taking her hand. We saved each other. We built a family. We created an institution that will outlive us and continue helping children long after we're gone. That's not small or insignificant. That's a legacy worth celebrating. Their youngest child, 2-year-old Samuel, came running across the yard toward them, followed by Anna and James and 3 of their older students who had been helping with evening animal care. The sight of all these children they had influenced and shaped, their own biological children, and the dozens of students who had become part of their extended family, suddenly made clear the magnitude of what they had accomplished. "Look at them," Lily whispered as she scooped up Samuel while the other children gathered around them. "Look at all the lives that have been changed because one desperate man was willing to spend his last dollar to save a stranger. And because one brave woman was willing to trust that stranger enough to build a new life with him," Ethan added, pulling both Lily and Samuel into his arms. As they stood together surrounded by the evidence of their shared work, the thriving academy, the happy children, the prosperous ranch that had grown from nothing into something significant, both Ethan and Lily understood that they had achieved something remarkable. Their marriage had begun as a desperate rescue, had grown into genuine love, and had ultimately become a foundation for an institution that would influence generations of families throughout the territory. They had proven that love, courage, and commitment to serving something larger than themselves could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities,